I mean, they're definitely in a skid. They really are. The month of March has not been kind to the Pistons here, but since February, if you kind of combine February and March together, they're sitting at 10-6. I mean, that's not the pace that they were on, but as you mentioned, it's a very difficult schedule. They've been playing a lot of contenders, and we're getting kind of to the tail end of the season. March basketball always gets a little bit weird. I mean, that Nets game was a really weird finish, so the sky's not falling, but they're not doing great, so they need to steer out of it.
Exactly, and there's ways to do that. They're bound to return to the mean to some extent, because that's what's interesting about this team. It's like people didn't want to give them credit when they were at the top and when they were being borderline dominant with missing some players. They were 5-1, I think, without Cade in the first half. When Danis was primarily filling in for him, they had that period where they had all of the backups in, and they were doing well during that period. They're very good when they're missing some of their key starters, especially because of the depth. But it's like they want to undercut that and undervalue that. But then when they lose 4 games in a row, it's like, well, how can we lose 4 games in a row? Well, because they're not necessarily the best team in the NBA, but they're, I think they've argued themselves into the conversation to a degree.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's an 82 game season. This sort of thing's going to happen. This is their first 4-game losing streak, and when they lost 3 in a row, I believe that was their first 3-game losing streak just a couple of days ago. So, I mean, like we've been saying, right? They're in a skid. I can pull up the stats right now, but in the month of March, they're sitting at about 44% from the floor, 32% from 3. Both of those are season lows for a month. It's been rough. It really has, and I think that you're losing Asar Thompson now over this little stretch, even though the schedule's getting easier. That's poorly timed. That's someone that you would want to lean on to set the ship right defensively, which also has been a bit of an issue recently. I'm sure they're going to pull out of it here soon, but, I guess maybe it's a little reminder that they were kind of punching above their weight for a little bit, and now they're punching below their weight. So we're going to level out somewhere in between these two.
Exactly. That's what I say about most of these issues where people tend to take a lot of issues to the extreme. It always lies somewhere in the middle. The answer is usually somewhere in the middle, because you leave the middle ground behind to make some sort of extreme argument or what have you, and usually it's somewhere in the middle. That's why we like to have these types of discussions rather than the hyperbolic. I mean, on most sports radio, it's, the Pistons are the best or the Pistons stink. There's nothing in between. Yeah. It's just, and that's what happens with all the sports. But I do want to talk to you about the Thompson thing, because I'm curious because this is interesting to me when somebody like Thompson goes out, how they fill in for him. I've wondered this with Duncan Robinson. We haven't really had to deal with that much, but now that they have Herder in the mix, I've quietly wondered, okay, when Duncan Robinson goes out, and even though Herder had barely played when I had first thought about this, I thought, do they skip to Herder because he plays the most similar role to Robinson and he can get that gravity and get that space? And then with Thompson, obviously the guy that plays the most similar role is Ron Holland. If you're choosing from the bench people, I guess it could be Javonte Green too, but somebody in that category. But I'm curious how you kind of see the rotation changing with him out, because obviously he is one of the more valuable defensive players in the league, and probably players overall, because he does create a lot on offense, even if his offense hasn't come along to the point where some people have liked so far.
Yeah, I would like to see Ron Holland get a shot here at it. I'm not sure that that's what J.V. Bickerstaff is going to do. The past couple of games, the first few games where Asar's been out, it's been Marcus Sasser stepping up, and that actually does track with the past now season and a half that we have of JB. He's very much in that Dwayne Casey school of, it's more important to not disrupt the rotation than to get someone else that's comparable into the lineup. So the benefit of putting out a Marcus Sasser or someone from the end of the bench, like, hey, maybe a Kevin Herter, would be that you're not disrupting the role of Ron Holland. You're not disrupting the role of like an Isaiah Stewart or a Danis Jenkins. Everyone kind of stays in their place, and then you just supplement someone that wasn't playing into that spot, and you hope that consistency kind of covers up for it. But I feel like the team needs that perimeter defender in the starting lineup. This is a defense first team, and we're watching here these past two games just how vital Asar was to that, because you look up and down the starting lineup. I mean, Cade Cunningham, he's a good defender for being a superstar, but he's not a great defender. He's pretty solid. Duncan Robinson's obviously pretty poor. He's not a great defender. I think Tobias Harris has really struggled defensively since the All-Star break. You kind of wonder if he needs like a veteran rest day at this point. He just looks a little slow to me. And then you're looking at Jalen Duren, who he's got better at being a disruptive defender, but he's still not all that positionally sound. So when you lose Asar Thompson, you're not just losing a guy who is all NBA defense, first team caliber, maybe defensive player of the year caliber one day. You're losing the defensive linchpin of the starting lineup. And when you replace him with a Marcus Sasser, who's smaller, pesky, but not an amazing defender, then you're asking more of Cade. You're asking more of Harris. You're asking more of Duren. And I just don't know if they're really up to that necessarily. So to me, it's Ron Holland. I'd like to see Ron Holland get in there. But, we've seen it be Marcus Sasser. Will JB change that up? I don't know. And I get why he's doing it the way he is. I just wouldn't.
Exactly. And I do think it's kind of interesting to discuss because I think we've even talked about this, Wes, but I know I have with several of the pundits that have been on the show. But, the idea of the succession plan potentially being Thompson moving to 4, and then obviously Harris isn't long for the league, but I don't mean that in the short term because he's still playing at a high level and he's a good leader for this team, and I'm not trying to write him off, but he is on the older side. I would say his production is pretty good for his age, but it's a good point as far as veteran rest day goes because he is very reliable. He does have a lot of availability, as the old saying, the Charles Barkley saying goes, but he doesn't. You do think he's got to break down at some point, and so then giving him a break probably isn't bad. And then you often wonder too, okay, so since one of the weirdly deeper positions of the team is center now, because you've got Duren, Stewart, and Reed all playing at a high level, do you fiddle around with trying to go a too big lineup against some teams and give Harris a break or work Holland in more or move Thompson down when he's back, what have you, because you do have a lot of flexibility with this lineup?
Honestly, that's something I really would like to see, like just maybe the next one or two games. Tobias's counting numbers over this losing streak they've been solid, but his usage is up and his percentages aren't amazing either. So he's coming off the month of February where he was in the 30s from both the floor and from 3, and he's picked it up from the floor. He's been a little bit more effective there, but he's down to 27% from 3. And like I said, he looks a step slow to me defensively. He's in the past, even earlier this season, done a much better job against Evan Mobley in previous matchups. And I thought Mobley was kind of running around him a little bit, which is unusual for him. But he is, like you said, he's an older veteran. He's not an old guy yet, but he's a veteran at this point. And if you could get him over these next couple of games, just a little bit of a breather, let his legs get back under him. And you're right, you can shift Isaiah Stewart down to the 4, bring Ron Holland up to the 3, and just kind of go for that, try to make up for the loss of Asar Thompson with volume, I guess, right? Because Stewart's an amazing defender in his own right, and Ron Holland's pretty good. I would like to see it. I don't know how the rest of the rotation would shape out. That's kind of the tough part, right? You're elevating 2 guys. You've already lost Asar Thompson, and you're going to give Tobias Harris a break. Like, that's a lot of Javonte Green, who's been playing well, but still, that's a big role increase. You start to see, like, Kevin Huerter really start to increase his minutes. Does Chaz Lanier get in there? Marcus Sasser still? Like, it could get kind of weird if you do that. This would be much easier if you could just say Asar's healthy and, hey, we're going to start Isaiah Stewart these next 2 games to give Tobias a break.
Oh, definitely. And I would like to see them, the part of this would be measuring some of those minutes, especially for the older folks. There's not a lot of older guys on the team. You got Harris, but if you've got Reed with some usable minutes, Green with some usable minutes, Herder with some usable minutes, Danish Jenkins, Sasser, you've got a lot of guys that you can throw in there. And so I just, think it'd be interesting to kind of play that out, because we'll take a quick break, but I want to come back with this after the break. That I'm curious of how you kind of want to see a preview of how this is going to work in the playoffs, because traditionally you shorten the roster a little bit, but with this roster, one of the main advantages has been the depth. So I'm curious about your takes on that. But we'll come back with Wes Davenport of the Pistons Pin Down podcast. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Wes Davenport of the Pistons Pulse and Pin Down podcasts, talking about the Pistons and their rotation, because I do think that's an interesting issue, and I've wondered this for a while with the depth, and I know that I'm not trying to make Javonte Green and Marcus Sasser and Paul Reed and some of the other folks something that they're not, but I also have been very happy with how they've performed in their somewhat limited duties, but not always limited. I mean, when they had the double big suspension, the Bash Brothers suspension, a la Mighty Ducks, they threw Paul Reed in there, and he did a very admirable job, and I do think they could use him because, man, there's something about his energy too. Him and Javonte Green, they might not have, and other guys do this. Holland is always tipping balls. He's got a ton of energy. Same with Isaiah Stewart. They're kind of in a similar category, but a little different. Thompson, obviously, is very smooth, and he's creating defensive havoc. But there's something about when Green and Reed get out there, it's not always pretty, but it makes everybody on the other team unsettled.
Yeah, it does. And when you're talking playoff rotations, too, it gets really interesting because the usual school of thought, right, is you pare it down and you get your best players down on the floor for longer, right? So you can even see the Pistons did this last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. They technically played 10 guys, but that's only because Isaiah Stewart played in the first game and then got hurt, right? So they're playing a 9-man rotation in that playoff series with Paul Reed instead of Isaiah Stewart. But this year, I don't know. I'm with you. I've really liked how Javonte Green's played. I like the idea of maybe getting a little, hustle B-ball Paul minutes in there just as a change of pace if you need it. The balancing act to me is how long do you want Cade playing, right? How long do you want Jalen Duren playing versus how hard this team is likely to go defensively when you get into a playoff setting? Is it worth it to just be able to come in waves, right? Keep everyone fresh, keep the legs loose, and just go at whoever they're playing in the first and second round with plenty of depth, plenty of energy to try to sustain until you get to the conference finals and hey, maybe even the NBA championship series as well. I think I'm actually leaning to the second one. I'm with you. Like I said, I like the energy stuff from those guys. I think sometimes Javonte Green can give them the spark that they need. I think you saw it a little bit in that Spurs game. He came in at the start of the second quarter, I think, and the Pistons went on a little run. Things leveled out, and it's just because of the hustle, right? Kind of changed the vibe of the game. You need guys like that. I'm willing to give it a shot, and I think that they should. Maybe just for a couple of games, and hey, if it's not working, then be more traditional.
Exactly, and because I get the paring down of the rotation. You want to throw your best out there, but I mean, we've seen iterations of this in the Pistons past here. That could be another podcast for you, the Pistons past podcast. We got the 3 Ps with that one. But the idea that, say, in the era after, or the going to work group era, kind of after they won the championship, and then they go to from Larry Brown to Flip Saunders. And they really, those guys were older and they were getting used a lot and they were looking good in the regular season, but they were kind of burning out in the postseason. And you worry about that with like a Tom Thibodeau coach team and some other teams. You don't have to do that with the Pistons. I get that you need continuity on the floor. I understand the flow of basketball well enough to understand. I mean, shoot, I'm not singling them out, but all you had to see was Jaden Ivey return, and then you got, okay, this is why we need a flow to the game and a certain rotation, because as soon as you threw him in the middle of that rotation, it was like, oh, this is not working like we'd like it. And it's not because he's not talented, it just was not helping the flow of the game. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you risk some of that too in the a little bit in the reverse, right? When you get to a playoff setting, if you do go ahead and pare down the rotation while everyone's playing a little bit different of a role than they usually did for 82 games of the regular season. So how does Ron Holland really respond to that, right? Getting presumably a few more minutes instead of Javonte Green in the playoffs, really his first playoffs, because he only played 5 of the games against the Knicks last year, and pretty low minutes too, by the way. I think he only played 7 minutes per in those 5 games. So if he's going to have a real role in the playoffs this season, I think he will. This is really his first kind of exposure to it. He got a little bit last year, but not a lot. So if you're going to take out Javonte Green, you're going to get more Ron Holland. How does he react to that? I got faith in him, right? He's a talented player. I really like what he's brought this year, but it's a change, and change is sometimes unpredictable. So I don't know. Like I said, I do think early rounds, where your head's at, that's where I'd want to go to. Just kind of keep things the way that they are with the rotation. The upshot, maybe you save Cade's legs a little bit for later on in the playoffs when you really, really would want to have him, when you really need that superstar performance stuff, in like, say, the conference finals or the second round. And you can always go back, right? But I feel like this is one of those you can't necessarily put the genie back into the bottle. If you change up the rotations and pare them down, it's also then another change to expand them again. It's not like you're just going back to square one. It's an adjustment on its own right. So I think maybe some consistency may actually play to their benefit.
Definitely. And it's an interesting discussion because there are different directions they can go, as we're talking about, but it's weird because if you took, say, I don't necessarily, let's even talk about the Knicks or a team like that, or maybe Cleveland, where if you took the top 4 or 5 players, then maybe the advantage would go to them. But once you go into the bench and the amount of depth that they have, I do think they're deeper, where you might, if you slotted everybody, okay, obviously hit their one competes very well with pretty much any other team's one. Cade Cunningham, as far as the top ranked guy, he's an MVP candidate. There's no need to really discuss that. But then 2, 3, 4, 5, you see how those slot in against maybe a Cleveland or the I'm talking about the East, but the Spurs, the Knicks, whoever, Oklahoma City. But their depth slots in very nicely, and I think that's where they can have the advantage, where they can kind of ride the hot hand a little bit too, a la the old Rockets teams, where you say, okay, yeah, you had Hakeem as kind of the main guy, but you were able to kind of go with the hot hand, and they were good at riding that hot hand. You could do that if you were the Pistons and say, hey, today it's just not, it's not Thompson's day, so we're going to go a little bit more Holland or a little bit more Green, or hey, with Stewart and Duran are getting into foul trouble, we're a little worried about having them for the end of the game. Time for some more Paul Reed. Let's disrupt. Or like you said, where Javonte Green gave that boost, hey, we're looking a little stagnant. Let's throw some energy out there. Let's get a unit that maybe isn't the most technically proficient unit, but involves some combination of Holland, Stewart, Reed, Green, and just ends up disrupting everything.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the devil's advocate to this, right, is if the Pistons go that route, they're very much cutting against the grain. Every other team, or presumably all the teams that the Pistons will be facing this year in the playoffs, they're going to pare down their rotation. So what that means is you're playing the fresh legs against the stars, right? If you play the Hornets, you're going to see more LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, things like that. If you're playing the Celtics, you're going to see more of the star players that they have. They're going to pare down that rotation. So that means your Javonte Green is going to be matched up with, say, hey, now a healthy Jason Tatum, possibly for a few minutes. And the question is, how does he hold up, right? If it's coming up later in the game or later in the series, does the freshness of the low-minute energy player kind of overcome some of the skill difference and talent difference from that other team's star player? It might. It has in the regular season. Playoffs are a different beast. So it's a difficult choice, I guess, is my only point there, right? You can see it from both ways. I'd like to give it a go. Just have a quick plug, kind of like with the 12-man rotation thing earlier in the year. It's like, all right, let's try it. it didn't work. Okay, we'll pull it back.
Exactly. I think there's no harm. It's kind of like you've got a decision tree to a degree where you say, okay, you go with you dance with the people that brought you, and you say, okay, I'm going to try this. But if it's not working, the nice part is they have some other options. They don't necessarily have to just ride with that. They can say, hey, I'm just not really feeling the energy or the fit with this particular player today. And I think the players, you got to give them some credit. I think the players have been pretty good with having variable roles. Obviously, Cade is going to get his minutes no matter what. Duncan is somewhat in that category, but he doesn't always finish games. And you got Duran and other guys that are going to get their particular minutes, but Thompson hasn't finished every game, and there have been other guys that have been rotating in and out. So it's nice that the guys are accepting of that, and that's an advantage too, because you don't want to have a situation where you bench somebody and then you have to work through it.
Right. Yeah, it's easier to make one change, right, if you need to make a change. So whatever you do, right, if you go the pare down the rotation route, then you got to stick with it. If you go the route that you and I are talking about, then you at least have the ability to adjust. And I do think that that's going to be valuable. But, the other thing to consider here, too, right, the Pistons are really playing an 11-man rotation. It's not like they're playing a 12 or a 13. It's like Paul Reed's great, but he's pretty much just injury relief at this point. To me, it's Javonte Green, right? Like, that's the swing guy. And I kind of think he's just earned the right to give it a go. You know what I mean? Like, he's played so well this season, and he's been better than I think any of us would have guessed when they made that signing. He's been really important to them defensively, just as another energy wing defender that they can throw at star forwards whenever they come across him. And he's impactful in that role. So you're going to see more of those guys in the playoffs. He's done it already hasn't he played every game? I think he has.
Yeah.
Regardless, he's been consistent.
Exactly. And so, there's a lot of options, and it's nice to have options. So that's what's interesting about this team is I think they would have the ability to do something different, because one of the criticisms I've always had of the way they let Bickerstaff go in Cleveland, which obviously I'm very happy about because the Pistons benefited from it, but they had some injuries and some rotation issues headed into that playoff run, and then they lost to the Celtics. It didn't really seem like he could have done much with that, but now I'm interested to see what he would do with a deeper rotation with a team that is a little bit more malleable. So it'll be interesting, but I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. It was a great discussion, especially about the rotation, and hopefully we'll talk again, if not before, in the presumptive playoff run here.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I always love coming on, so I appreciate you giving me the ring again. And hey, go Pistons! They'll pull out of the skid.
Definitely, they're on the upswing at some point. But make sure to plug all the places that you're in too. I want to make sure to direct everybody to your social media and the different spots here.
Man, I'm out of practice. I totally forgot. Yeah, so I'm the producer of the Pistons Pulse podcast. That's hosted by Bryce Simon and Amari Sankofer II over at the Detroit Free Press. If you guys aren't listening, make sure you're checking that out. Those guys do an amazing job every week. I'm also a host of the Mailbag Show through Detroit Bad Boys, call it the Pin Down Podcast. And we just take your guys' fan questions every week, and Blake Silverman and I, we try to break them down as best as we can. And it's been a lot more uplifting this year, which has been great. So check us out over there. And I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at the Real West D3.
Be sure to check them out in all those places. All great stuff, and we do have a lot of those names on the show. Pretty much all the names from the podcast that you listed, and then also a lot of the Detroit Bad Boys writers have been on the show. So, what's that?
I said, they're the best.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll continue to have all you guys on, and you all add to the show and improve it. So we appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Appreciate you, Ryan. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Wes.